Savvy Spotlight is a monthly feature introducing foreign and Japanese women at the front line of what's successful, contributing, cool, unique, and interesting in Japan. Today, we're shining the spotlight on Saki Nakahara, an immigration lawyer with a passion for Japanese tea ceremony.
So my name is Saki, and I am a gyoseishoshi, an immigration lawyer at Small Seasons. I'm also the owner. I was born in the UK to Japanese parents. So my father was in the UK for work, and we were just expat family, and that's how I spent most of my childhood overseas. I was in Japan for some time during elementary school, but soon I was in Singapore, Shanghai, going to international school there, and came back to Japan for university. I came back to Japan because I wanted to spend more time with my grandmother and because I wanted to study sociology and see, kind of face my identity as a Japanese. So I was always very motivated to contribute to Japan's arts and culture field, particularly because of my connection with, Japanese tea ceremony. I was inspired to pursue a career in immigration law because I realized that it helps people who's genuinely interested in Japanese cultures come to Japan, explore something, find something that they can take home, or even collaborate with artists or people in Japan to make something great. That's where my main motivation and inspiration came from.
What is a gyoseishoshi, and how does it differ from other lawyers?
So gyoseishoshi lawyers are also called administrative scriveners. So we basically handle procedures and paperwork to be submitted to the government. And it could be various things like submitting visa applications on clients' behalf, or getting business permits, setting up a company in Japan. We do that in collaboration with other lawyers called shihoshoshi lawyers. And we're different from bengoshi in that we don't handle disputes, but we do contract drafting and a lot of other types of things.
How did you make the connection between your passion for arts and culture with law specifically?
So initially, I couldn't really connect the dots yet. I just had an instinct, telling me, I feel like the law is gonna help me do what I want to do in, arts and culture. I'm helping, for example, artists who want to come to Japan get artist visa to come to Japan to pursue their artistic activities, and even collaborate with Japanese creatives to, make something together, and that would always help Japanese traditions that are getting less popular, especially among young people these days, kind of be under a spotlight again.
Could you talk us through your daily routine?
It starts with a cup of matcha usually. It just makes me really happy and be excited to wake up in the morning. And I really recommend everyone doing it too, because it doesn't have to be bitter matcha. You can just make it lighter, and you'll have a great start, and it's healthy. And my days are quite different every day, but I would start checking emails in the morning and sometimes spend time strategizing, which requires more creative space in my mind. So I go to a cafe to look at my client's portfolio, if they're applying for an artist visa, see how I can make the case strong for the immigration. In the afternoon, I focus less, so I try to take it easy, but again, checking emails, some paperwork, contacting immigration to ask some questions, to make sure I'm updated on important points. And I also make sure I get some time for doing Pilates or something that I like. And I actually have a book that's dedicated to things that I like to do. So I make sure I spend time on those things instead of just resting or working.
From your point of view, what are the most common visa challenges for foreigners in Japan?
So I think the challenges the foreigners face when living in Japan in terms of immigration is not knowing when to communicate with immigration or when to submit notification to the immigration. I think people get their visa, and as long as they have the visa, they can just live in Japan legally until the date expires. But actually, depending on what you do in Japan, there are different types of visas you need to get. Maybe you need to get special permission, and you never know, right? If you have an immigration lawyer handle it for you, maybe these things you don't even think about. But these things, sometimes when it comes to renewing your visa, you realize, oh, I should have done this, but I didn't. Now what do I do? So that are the common challenges that I see among foreigners living in Japan.
Are there any unique reasons people use your services? And what advice do you give to these people?
I think unique situations where people come to me seeking my support would be strategizing. I think it's not a common concept when it comes to immigration, but I think it's also really important to plan in advance. For example, you come to Japan and you want to stay here long term. Obviously, you want to aim for permanent resident visa, but you just think, you kind of maybe read through the requirements, think, okay, maybe after 5 years I will consult a lawyer again. In situations like that, I actually recommend seeking advice from the very beginning, asking a specific question, like I'm applying for this visa now, but I would love to have PR, as soon as possible actually. Is there anything I can do? And there are things you could do. So I think it's great if people could also kind of have the mindset of strategizing.
What sort of things do you strategize with your clients?
So in a situation like that, we would be, for example, discussing whether you can get enough points on that highly skilled professional visa chart that is on which if you have 70 or 80 points, you could possibly get a visa at a faster rate than staying in Japan for 10 years. Or things like maybe things you can negotiate with your current workplace. Maybe it's salary, maybe it's your position, maybe it's your, or other things like taking the Japanese exam, JLPT. Another thing would be as simple as being aware of how many days to stay in Japan in a 12-month period, because they will also be looking. And I think it's also important to really think about whether you really want a permanent resident in Japan, because some people even get rid of the permanent resident visa after acquiring it because they'll be taxed more than before. So a lot of those considerations we can all discuss at the very beginning.
Are there any common visa issues when it comes to families moving to Japan?
So one of the common issues I see is people under dependent visa, which is the visa that's given to you if you have followed your husband or wife who has a working visa to come work in Japan. So you're a dependent, so financially you are, they will think that, the immigration will think that you are dependent, right? But then what if you wanted to continue working remotely? Or what if you wanted to start working in Japan? In those cases, I think it's important to consult with an immigration lawyer or even the immigration bureau, if you could contact them yourself. When it comes to, let's say, business renewal of your husband or wife who has a working visa, it's important to be consistent with your story. So, for example, if you're working remotely, have you reported that to the immigration bureau? If you wanted to work a lot, is your income more than your husband's or wife's when you're supposed to be a dependent? So those inconsistent things should be addressed prior to applying to your visa, and it could be as simple as discussing the matter with the immigration.
What's the best next step for dependents who want to work in Japan after arriving?
If someone is here on a dependent visa and let's say they find a job that they want to do, what could she or he do? The best next step would be to, if they can sponsor your visa, it's a good time to change to a working visa. If you want to try part-time, then you can apply for special permission to be engaged in other activities, which will allow you to work, and you actually cannot work without that permission. So every time you want to start working, definitely check that. And if your business grows, if you feel like you go your path, then business manager visa could also be an option, although it's one of the most difficult visas in Japan to obtain and to maintain. But those paths, you could talk to the immigration about it, or a lawyer if your lawyer is open to kind of talking about like what's the best way, even if you don't have a specific question, like what could my future be. I think that would be a great thing to ask your lawyer.
What are some things you want people to be more aware of?
One thing that I think would be helpful for foreigners living in Japan to kind of understand is to be proactive about their own visa applications. For people who use immigration lawyers, maybe they will handle everything for you, and you can trust their expertise if you can trust them. But it's also important to know the right questions to ask for yourself. Like, what is this visa? What does this mean? What could I do within this scope? Like we said before, like what kind of could I engage in work with this visa? Or is there any limit? Or any considerations, to help you avoid possible misunderstandings or problems in the future. And for that, I also think it's important to have all the documents in your possession. Sometimes people who come to me asking for help on visa renewals, they don't have previous application documents. If you use the same lawyer throughout, that's fine. But even I tell my own clients, like, if you want to change your immigration lawyer, of course you can. And for that, they need to make sure they bring their past application documents, so your applications are consistent throughout, and so you are aware of the information the Immigration Bureau has on you, because it's really easy to give wrong information unintentionally. Maybe you just didn't have it organized, so you accidentally gave them wrong information, but they would take that as a lie. So it's important to have all the information, all the documents. You have everything in your control, so if you ask questions, you can answer them confidently.
What's the most rewarding aspect of your career?
My clients are all very professional and sweet, and I'm lucky to have clients like that. And especially clients for artist visas, they have their passion, they really love Japanese cultures, and they are excited to collaborate with Japanese professionals. And I had a case where I could connect a client of mine with a local business in Japan, and they are discussing collaboration ideas for, after the applicant can get the artist visa. And it is just so good to see that collaboration. It's not really in the scope of being an immigration lawyer, but it's really heartwarming to see two artists, two passionate people from different backgrounds meeting and discussing something to create something together. And I know that is going to positively influence Japan's arts and culture scene. Being able to feel that I'm part of it has been really rewarding.
Do you have any memorable moments in your career you're especially proud of?
Another situation was when I was working with a client who I thought was very organized, probably one of the most organized people I've ever met, and be like top 10, like in global ranking or something. And she told me after she got her visa approved that she really appreciated my attention to detail, which was surprising coming from someone so organized as her, and also because I wasn't born organized. And I am organized because I have to, and I've been working hard for it. And so it was, again, really rewarding. And it also shows that even if you're not good at something, if you put your mind to it and try to build it professionally, it could come to that level where you're confident and you can say, oh yeah, I do this well.
What advice would you give to young women aspiring to enter the legal profession in Japan?
So one advice that I would like to give, if I may, would be to listen to your instinct. And it could mean a variety of things, including saying yes or no, and maybe say no more often, because a lot of times you tend to say yes or maybe instead of no, because no sounds harsh, or it seems like you're blocking someone's offer or you feel bad. At least that's how I sometimes feel. But usually when you feel like saying no actually, and you say no, it feels great. As a business owner, I do feel the pressure to be business driven, and I can be, and I'm motivated to, of course, get more clients, achieve certain level of business. But at the same time, there is a part of me who doesn't really need that much business. I want to make sure I provide value, but it doesn't mean more sales, for example. So every time I feel like, I'm not sure, I really stop and reflect. Like, do I really want this? Like, is it that important? People, like, it's going to maybe mean like 3 months of worth your salary, but does it matter that much to you? And sometimes it's no, and I have said no, and it would feel good. So I know that was the right thing to do. I guess really listening to how you feel and your instinct would be important.
How do you balance your career with your personal life?
So work-life balance is difficult for me because I like my work. And when it comes to your own business, you're just more motivated. You want to try everything you can. But I also have family, so I try to prioritize them, even though it's like my first few years of starting a business. And I do that by actively just making a plan, even on weekdays, not to rest, but to go for dinner, to go watch a movie, or plan a surprise for your friends, anything. And I think that makes a difference for me. Another thing I would do is to know when I'm fully booked. A friend of mine asked me once because I was telling her how busy I am, and she said, "Are you fully booked?" Surprised, because I didn't think about it before, whether I'm fully booked or not, I just work. But to kind of realize like when you are fully booked, like you have the clients, you are at full, capacity, that also helps. And you can do that by setting number of hours you ideally want to work every day. And whenever you get a case to work on, like how many hours would that take? And then calculate how many hours you have left. If you don't have any hours left, then you're fully booked and it's time to say no. I think that has helped me a lot.
What are some of your hobbies outside of work?
So outside of work, I do tea ceremony. I learn it from my mom these days, and she's based in Ito, Shizuoka. And there's so much nature, and every time you are surrounded by green, you kind of realize, oh, maybe I spent too much time working in front of a laptop. So that also helps me. And my husband is also helping me ensure that I have time for myself and for us. Every time he says I'm too busy, that means I'm not taking enough time, because he's an understanding person. I also kind of make sure to pick on those signs, to spend time with him, to go out for dinner, explore neighborhood. And I also love to go to museums. I'm especially into like Japanese pottery and things like that. But I also have recently been to Setagaya Literary Museum. They hold exhibitions about mangas and things, and it's really interesting. And every time you go to exhibitions, you realize maybe you are not having enough fun in your lives.
What's your favorite thing about living in Japan?
My favorite thing about living in Japan is the whole system of like apprenticeship. And I'm saying this because I'm a tea apprentice, and I basically felt like I gained new lens to see Japan from a different way when I started learning tea. It's like you see things in different lights, you notice different things, and Japan is obviously, culturally rich country, great to live in. But if you have someone like a teacher supporting you to pursue your curiosity in an area that you want to learn more about, it could be, flower arrangements, tea ceremony, anything. My tea ceremony teacher passed away a few years ago, but the experience is still helping me see Japan in a different light. If you have access to those things, I would definitely make most of the opportunity.
What is your Japan travel tip?
So From a very personal perspective, I would try matcha in every location you go. And maybe you're not a fan of matcha or you're not interested, but it's personally something I look forward to. Every location I go, I try to find matcha. Wherever there is a matcha, there's usually a very cultural and historical architecture to enjoy, or there's some kind of story behind it. So it's a good way to find these new things that might not be on the internet even, so that I would recommend it.
Find our past Savvy Spotlight features over on our site at savvytokyo.com. For new and upcoming features on more inspiring women in Japan, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If you have anyone in mind you'd like us to interview, please leave us a comment with your recommendations.